In today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to instantly fix your deadlift form by paying close attention to the deadlift start position. The deadlift is unique amongst the big three because it starts with an upward phase or a concentric phase, which means that unlike the squat or bench, we don't have an eccentric or downward phase of movement where we can load our bodies with a ton of potential energy and use that as part of a stretch reflex. There also isn't any sort of implement or way to kind of wedge yourself or set up into the barbell like there is when you're squatting or benching, because the bar isn't loaded up on a rack. You can't push up against it and get nice and tight. When it comes to the deadlift, it's just you and dead weight on the bar. There are three physical landmarks that I look for when I'm coaching someone through their deadlift. I'm looking at where the scapula is relative to the bar, where the bar is relative to their feet. And lastly, I'm also looking to see that you can hinge while maintaining those two previous markers.
Yeah, I gotta be honest with you. I never really liked Star Wars.
Oh, yes, you did.
Your shoulder blades must remain over the barbell during the entirety of the deadlift until you lock out. Now, it might be hard to visualize or feel your shoulder blade in space, and especially so when it's in correlation to a foreign object that's just laying on the ground. But a cue that's always worked for me and my clients is to get tall with the bar once you set your grip. Doing so establishes a kinetic chain between you and the bar and will allow you to feel where tension should be before beginning the lift itself. With this cue, it's not just getting tall with your head and allowing the hips to sink, trying to squat your deadlift up, but rather getting tall with the entirety of your spine, leading with the upper back while feeling tension run across the upper and lower regions, resisting the bar with the entirety of your spine, and allowing the slack of your body to be pulled by the weight itself. Now, doing this, your hips are probably going to be a little bit higher than you might anticipate. And personally, I'm not a big fan of trying to think about where my hips are in space or what my hips are doing necessarily. I've always found that if I make sure my lower back is slightly extended and resisting the weight of the bar, and make sure that I'm feeling the weight run across my shoulders, that focusing on those things already puts my hips where they need to be. It just so happens that they are a little bit higher than you might expect, and that's totally okay. Because when the hips are slightly higher and pushed back, you're naturally going to be put in a position to hinge. And every deadlift at the end of the day is ultimately a hinge. Even a sumo deadlift, which is kind of this pseudo squat, you're still going to be hinging in some capacity. You can also judge where your scapula is in place if the crease of your armpit and the line that is drawn there leads up and links up with the bar in a straight line, then you're going to be in the right position. Sometimes I personally like to think also about just stacking my shoulders, elbows, and wrists with the barbell. If all those joints make a perpendicular line relative to the horizon with the barbell, then I know I'm in a good spot to pull.
General Kenobi,
Commander Cody.
the siege goes well. With our continued barrage, their shields should be down in 3 months.
The second thing I look for, similarly to the shoulder blades, is that the barbell start and remain over the midfoot. And when I say midfoot, I'm referring to the entirety of your foot, not just what's visible. For conventional, I find that having the bar start at roughly half an inch to an inch in front of my shins will do the trick. But for sumo, I have the bar start right up against my shins. Now, that last bit might be a little bit more individual to you. I've had some people tell me they like it just a hair in front, but I'm just right up against the shins. Just something to consider. Regardless, the bar must stay and remain over the midfoot, whether it's right up against your shins or not from the beginning. As a side note, when you are lifting, the bar should always be in contact with your shins and thighs as you approach lockout, unless you're performing a very specific deadlift variation that doesn't require complete contact. So even if the bar is slightly in front of your shins when you're setting up, it will eventually make contact and must remain in contact with your body after the point of initiation. And that's just with where we want the bar to start. when you begin the lift, be careful not to move the bar with your hands or kick the barbell in front of you with your shins, ruining the bar placement and causing issues off the floor. This is partly why I like the cue of standing tall with the weights. It's intuitive because it's your internal feeling and proprioception that places you where you need to be. If you're setting up with your hips too low and your posture too upright, then you're gonna roll the bar forward. But if we can get tall with the weights, with the entire spine, then that's not going to be a problem. Granted, this is heavily reliant on someone's coordination, but quite frankly, the most underrated skill to have in lifting is coordination, and it's worth exercising and practicing.
But we've been here a month already.
Yes, sir. We're right on schedule.
Lastly, because the deadlift is a hinge and because a good quality hinge requires the lower back to remain neutral and rigid, and because the more you allow your spine to flex, the harder it is to lock out your deadlifts, I look for and cue a nice rigid spine. My go-to cue is to push your belly through your legs so that we can achieve that tightness. In other words, we are extending our lower backs against the weight of the bar that wants to flex us, actively resisting it and creating an isometric contraction, one of the main functions of the lower back. This is where a muscle flexes and tensions in place. So when we're deadlifting, we really shouldn't see any dramatic changes in the state or position of your lower back. Which is why when we hinge our hips effectively, we are distributing tension across the most amount of muscle mass, being able to recruit the most amount of muscle to contribute to moving that weight. Deadlifts that start with excessive amounts of flexion do not produce similar results. The results are worse because muscle groups like the hamstrings, adductors, and glutes are basically ineffective with those excessive amounts of back flexion. These three things do not exist without one another. How well you can hinge is the most important skill that you must apply to your deadlifts. And keeping the bar over the midfoot and under the scapulas is just plain old physics or geometry. Or, I don't know, whatever. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. The most effective way to move a lot of weight is gonna be in a straight line. And keeping balance requires us to maintain load over the midline of our body with the loaded bar. Alright everyone, so that's going to be it for today's video. The next video I have lined up is going to be all about bracing for the deadlift and how I personally like to do it. Yes, another deadlift video. I just have a fixation right now, I guess. Anyway, so if you want to be notified as soon as that video drops, and if you feel like I deserve your subscription, then click that subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified. If you guys liked this video, then like the video, and I'll see you guys once that new video drops.